Alright, chapter 4. Celebration story. Sandy on hiding. My family has always courted. I'm sad to say that even though my family had this value established to protect me, I lost my virginity when I was 15. I decided never to marry. God called me to be a missionary in a very specific and remote location in Africa. I would serve him there as a single woman. I didn't court again until I was a senior in college. My dad asked me to agree to court a guy. I did it just so I wouldn't have to tell my dad about my past. I figured the relationship would fizzle, but it didn't. Imagine my shock. Sorry. When weeks later my suitor told me that God had put this tiny little remote location in Africa on his heart to reach for Christ. The exact place I'd been praying for all these years. Soon, this man I'd come to love in just a few months asked for my hand in marriage. I ran away crying. Surely I wasn't worthy. Hours later, my suitor found me and simply said, "I know why you feel unworthy. It can only be one thing. I forgive you, and I would like to spend my life helping you to live in that forgiveness. I feel the Lord wants me to give you 2 weeks." Exactly 2 weeks from that day, I was sitting in a purity retreat. I'd been drugged to by... Oh, I think that meant to say dragged to by my friends. Dana Gresh was the speaker. I felt God's healing flood my heart as I talked to her that day. After she prayed for me, she asked me, "So what about that marriage proposal?" I just smiled and said, "I'm going to say yes." There's one thing I want to say. This was a very specific situation. Do not marry a guy after only knowing him for months. Wait at least a year, I think. It's a good time. Okay. That's all I have to say about that. Alright. So Satan's second big fat lie. Sex lie, whatever. Hiding behind the fig leaves. Ha! Now that you've fallen, God has no use for you. So another paraphrase of Genesis 3 verses 7 through 13. Then Adam and Eve suddenly realized they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of God walking nearby in the garden in the cool of day, and they hid behind some trees, and God called to Adam, "Where are you?" And he answered, "I heard you, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree I told you not to?" Adam said, "It was the woman you gave me. Of course. She gave some to me, and I ate it." And God said to Eve, "What have you done?" Eve answered, "It was a snake. He deceived me, and I ate it." Each night was the same. I walked along a dark, busy highway with Michael. Horns blared, lights glared, and yet the darkness was thick. Aside from the busy highway, I couldn't see anything but blackness. I held my boyfriend's hand more tightly. I turned to look at him. I called his name. He quickly looked away, avoiding my gaze. I called him again. Why wouldn't he look at me? Suddenly a great shaft of light dropped from the sky and loomed authoritatively in front of us. It had a warm golden glow which contrasted sharply against the coldness of the rest of this place. My boyfriend quietly pulled his hand from mine, and I felt him step behind me. The great light was directly in front of me. I did not hear a voice, but I felt as if that shaft of light was the presence of God inviting me to step into it, to choose God instead of this earthly love that I wanted to turn and cling to. I hesitated just long enough for the light to vanish. As quickly as it appeared, I turned around, and my boyfriend was gone. The highway was empty. The darkness engulfed me. I was alone. "No!" I screamed, waking from my deep sleep. Blue moonlight reached into my bedroom and created a shaft of light across my bed. I looked into it and scrunched deeper into the blankets, heavy with a cold sweat. How many times in the past months had I had that dream awaken me from my restless slumber? It was like no other dream I had ever had. It was real, and every detail was memorable. There was meaning in it. My pain was so great. I inched deeper and deeper into the covers and hid my cold sweat. The man who is now my wonderful husband was a resident assistant in college when once he walked into a unit to check on things late Saturday evening. He heard weeping coming from a closet. Opening the door, he found a guy curled up in the closet. The young man wanted to be left alone in that closet, but he was an emotional wreck. After a lengthy consultation and trying to determine what could possibly have driven a healthy, strong man to hide in a closet and wail, an admission came. The young woman he had been dating and hoped to marry one day had finally agreed to have sex with him. They did. And now he was hiding, uncertain as to whether or not he could repair the disrespect he had shown her and himself. Sound familiar? Sort of like what Adam and Eve did after they bit into that fruit. Oh, my friend, I can tell you that they did not hide lightly. They hid with a great sense of grief and guilt. I know from experience. In choosing my boyfriend, I lost the awareness of the very presence of God that I once so loved. It was a lot like Adam and Eve's experience. It wasn't that God wasn't there. He was walking nearby saying, "Where are you, Dana?" I was too ashamed to come out. I resigned from teaching Sunday school. I quit my job as a summer missionary. I hid. I can just see Satan off in the corner laughing. Ha! Now that you've fallen, God has no use for you. It took me a very long time to realize that that was a big fat lie. Oh, to have those years back. What's the truth? One thing I want to say on my own personal note is I do think if you messed up in an epic way, especially in a way where other people can find out, you should consider taking a break. Not forever, but you should kind of consider taking a break and get yourself together, depending on how, what it was that you did and how long it takes to make amends and stuff. So, before I get to the bottom line, let me first say there is no escaping the consequences of sin. Adam and Eve, because of their sin, were kicked out of the garden. Adam had to work hard to feed his family, and Eve would experience great pain in childbirth. Even the snake lost its legs. The consequences were tough. King David truly sinned. He had sex with another man's wife, Bathsheba. Then, because he got her pregnant, he ended up killing her husband to hide his sin. Some pretty tough consequences, really. There is an illegitimate baby on the way, and blood on David's hands. I bet David and Bathsheba both had a lot of sleepless nights. I can picture Bathsheba greatly mourning the loss of her husband's life because, in a way, it was her fault. And later, when the child died, I can see them both thinking about the fact that they would never have known that horrible loss had they not sinned together. Yes, the consequences of sin can last a long time and be very painful, but does that mean that God no longer wanted David to be in a loving, lasting relationship with him? Well, God watched the whole soap opera-like drama unfold, and he sent Nathan to confront David. My guess is that David was in the place where you think you have to work your way back into God's heart, wipe the slate clean, and then come before God. When David was confronted, he repented, and Nathan immediately said, "The Lord has taken away your sin," in 2 Samuel 12:13. There was no hesitance, no delay. God immediately welcomed David back into his presence, and he did continue to use him. David will forever be honored as a man after God's own heart, which we can see in 1 Samuel 13:14. Did his sexual sin mean that God had no use for him? No. Satan likes to make you feel as if your sin has ruined you and will stick with you forever. The truth is that God picks up that sin and hurls it as far as the east is from the west. He promises us in Ezekiel 18:22 that none of the offenses he has committed will be remembered. Believe that. Know the truth of God and crush Satan's lie with it. For a long time I felt as if my sexual sin was my ultimate destruction. I had forsaken God's plan and made a lesser choice. My heart got tangled up, and now I was paying the consequences. I felt lonely in the midst of what should have been a fun relationship. I felt trapped during years when I should have been feeling free and enjoying my singleness. I felt ashamed to enter into God's presence. Ever feel something like that? Yours may not be necessarily sexual in nature. Maybe you are just consumed with the idea of having a boyfriend, or your language robs you of your testimony. How do you release it so that you don't feel utterly useless in God's hand, or useless in general? Let me try to bring the classic writing of the great author C.S. Lewis into today's lingo. In the book The Great Divorce, he writes about a slimy red lizard clinging to a certain ghost. The lizard taunted and teased that ghost, whispering great lies to him every day. The ghost tried to control the lizard, but it was not successful. An angel appeared and offered to rid the ghost of that little lizard. But the ghost understood that to be relieved of the beast, it would be necessary to kill it. The ghost just didn't have the heart for that. That's when the rationalizations began. The ghost thought he might train and tame the lizard. He thought perhaps he could release it gradually. The angel insisted the gradual approach would not work, as this little red lizard was a very good liar. It was either the death of the lizard or the defeat of the ghost. Finally, the ghost gave the angel permission to remove the lizard. The lizard screamed as it was twisted from the shoulder it clung to. With one great twist of the wrist, the angel sent it directly to the ground, where the impact broke its back. Then an amazing thing happened. The ghost suddenly became a perfect man, and the limp, dead lizard was transformed into a very much alive silver and gold stallion. The new man leaped onto the great horse, and they rode off into the distance. As the teacher in Lewis's book explained, what is a lizard compared with a stallion? Lust is a weak, poor, whimpering, whispering thing compared with that richness and energy of desire which will arise when lust has been killed. Up until the age of 15, I never doubted God's ability to lead me and use me. During the course of my relationship with Michael, that confidence was shattered into a million pieces. I was not able to pick up those pieces because a little lizard on my shoulder was whispering the most horrible things into my ears. You cannot break up with him. Don't be a hypocrite. Come on, you won't do that again. What will you tell your friends about why you broke up? Well, you might want to stop teaching Sunday school until you get this little thing worked out, and by all means, don't even think of teaching Christian clubs. It's not that you're really bad, but what kind of an example would it be if you were found out? You need to save those jobs for the truly pure in heart. I want you to know what I did not know when I was trapped in my sin. I acted so much like Adam and Eve did when they took that forbidden fruit. I hid. I felt as if God had no use for me now that I had fallen. Yes, there were consequences, but just as God walked through the garden lovingly, looking for his dear Adam and Eve, he was eager to bring me back into a loving relationship with him. Eve was like that angel, just waiting to break the neck of that little flying lizard lust. I was just not having much luck getting the nerve up to give him permission. So, write your story. What about you? What's the name of that little lizard in your life? Lust? I'll write sex. Heavy petting, which sounds kind of silly, but I understand what she's saying, like, touching all over, and you're really not supposed to be touching. Boy craziness, language, binging and purging, anger, materialism. Stop right now and visualize that little slimy lizard on your shoulder. Then look directly into the eyes of God who can free you from it, and just say, I'm helpless here. What comes next? Go ahead, grab your journal and write about it. Please do it.